Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. We are nearing the end. When this uploads, it'll be the end of 2021. Another year. And last December, we had the same theme. It's not the end, finding hope. And I do like the idea, especially during this time of year. We share the discussion again. Thank you, Grace, for coming in and sharing your insight with us today. This time of year, I've been to Europe during the Christmas season, and it is very nice. And there's Father Christmas, and there's Christmas pudding and all that stuff. And I just remember fond memories, but at the same time, you also know that this can be a reminder of what someone doesn't have anymore. So, again, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I want to share with those in the States, of course, that, the 1-800-273-8255 is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. I believe there is something in the UK and Europe that you could call, and I'm going to find that out next time. I'm going to put it in notes because each, there's resources out there. I want to share with those who are listening and watching that you are not alone. There's help out there. How you say, support is different for everyone, and what people need. And I just encourage everyone, wherever they're at, to find what resources are there. As I always begin, I know that people say it better than I do, Grace. So I'm going to start with Desmond Tutu, and he says, "Hope is being able to see that there is light despite all the darkness." How do you read this when you see this quote, Grace?
Yeah, I mean, it shows that even in the darkest of times, there's always going to be a glimmer of light. But I mean, it's quite easy to say that when you're not in a dark situation. I mean, myself, when I was in like a dark depression, it was hard to see that light existed because it wasn't there, and I didn't feel like seeing it. But when you open up to it, like when you open up to God's love and stuff, then he will embrace you. And I think in that way, I interpret this quote.
Yeah, I feel that when it comes to darkness and what we perceive, sometimes it not to minimize the situation that people go through, or that I've experienced myself, or people I know, or people who have lost during this time of year. A lot of reminders of loss. It's also, remember, at least from my perspective, when I, some people close to me have that passed away. One thing they say, celebrate their lives. I mean, there's a celebration of it, because it's each person gives a little bit part of that, but the experience, I feel, when it comes to this quote is that every day can't be a crisis situation. There is hope, and the idea of uncertainty that we're talking about, in a way, uncertainty only lives when there can only live with hope. There can't be certainty and hope. You understand that logic? Like, you can't have everything certain. Then you know what's going to happen. Then there is no need for hope. So I love how this month theme is finding hope. And the only way we can find hope, that there is a degree of uncertainty, unfortunately, but there is a lot of hope out there. Strength on the same line is a funny word, because a lot of people like the underdogs sometimes. You don't want to go for the person who has all the things in their favor. But I do the consistency, saying, I will try again tomorrow. I want to hear your perspective. How do you define? Defining words is very important for me, especially when it comes to recovery, when it comes to healing. How do you define strength from your own personal experience and in others? Because I think this is very important, and is a part of central focus of this month's theme.
I mean, I would interpret strength quite similar to hope, in the way that it's always there within you, but you have to be the one to seek it out.
Yeah.
And I think with strength, from my own personal experience, I've shown myself that no matter what I go through, I will always get through it,
Yes.
And it brings you resilience and radiance along with it. So strength is always there in us. It's just waiting for us to kind of like embrace it. And I think you find your strength when you go through hard times, don't you?
Yes.
So when you go through these hard times and you think that you're not going to get through it, and then you find out that you do, and at the end of it you look back and you're like, wow, I'm strong and it feels good, you know?
And like you said before, it's an opportunity a lot of times to learn something about yourself and move forward.
Yeah.
A lot of times in life, we're so consumed of the obtaining and not the becoming. You know, we become something more. Like we transition, and I feel when you define strength, for me, it's not when you are already strong and things are going well. It's when you have nothing, but you say at the end of the day, it didn't work out today, Grace. It didn't work out to me, Robert. I'm gonna try again tomorrow. That's strength. It's going when you don't. You're depleted, but you're going because there's some purpose. You know, Revive Ministries is not faith. We don't proselytize, basically, but at the same time, I do find a wealth of I don't know, when it comes to purpose-driven recovery. When we have a purpose, it can't just be a bunch of shouldn'ts. I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't do that. It should be something more, whatever that may be. Just one quote I want to share before we continue talking. It says, leave everything undefined, including yourself. Befriend uncertainty, fall in love with the mystery. Kneel at the altar of not knowing. Give your questions time to breathe, and the answers will find you. This is haunting, and it's a lot easier to read than to do. You know, when you're in the midst of it all, you want quick fixes, and the problem is, I don't know for you, Grace, but a lot of people are experts when you're going through stuff. A lot of people know what's best for you, but a lot of times allowing yourself to reflect, not to say they have any malicious intent, is just slowing down and processing and healing, because the process of healing is very intrinsic to your personal speed and growth. And I don't know, what are your thoughts when you see this quote? What comes to mind?
I love it. I think it's a great quote. I like the fact that it focuses on like this kind of mystery, that life is a mystery and that we have to kind of like go with it. No matter how much we plan in life, you never know what's going to happen. It's like, you know, you can only plan up to a certain extent, and then something bad could happen or something good could happen and you don't expect it. So I think giving yourself time to breathe and to experience life in all its uncertainty is the best way to go, because then you're never kind of shocked about what's around the corner, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And for me, I feel defining what I mean and what we mean by this is very important, because being prudent and making wise choices is important. You know, you don't want, like, those are kind of foundational, but at the same time, you can't plan everything. Nothing can be absolutely certain, and I think that's where the rubber hits the road. This time of year is very hard because of anniversaries. Whether the person you loved or is not here anymore, it's just this culmination of the end of the year. You kind of reflect on who's not here anymore, or something you may think you've lost, whether it's a job right now or something that you feel defines you. And I feel when we talk about, this embracing the mystery of it all, the uncertainty is, and I would say it can be gives you enough room to kind of breathe and allow yourself to, reflect on these important points. Thomas Edison said it this way: our greatest weakness lies in giving up. The most certain way to succeed is always try one more time. And success is also something you need to define. Is a success something that you obtain, or is it something that you yourself, feels important? What is more important to you when it comes to your life, your relational life, your healing? Is it a bunch of stuff, or is it the people around you? Is it building those relationships and connections? I feel that is something we have to ask ourselves. What has been your experience with your own faith? You mentioned it a little bit, and obviously I do encourage those who come on my podcast to share what has worked with you and in regards to finding hope, because I know last time you were here you shared a little bit of your experience before, and I don't minimize that. I feel it's very courageous to come on here and just kind of share with people, but I feel also I want to kind of ask you, what has your experience been with your faith, your own faith? and finding hope?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's been hard. There's been times where I think the darkness has kind of seeped in so much that like it felt like God had abandoned me, especially in times of like when I was in a really low state of depression and in the clinic. I felt very alone and not there really. I wasn't present in myself. I didn't feel like myself. I felt like another person. And like all hope had drained me. And so, it was kind of at this point where I remember being like, am I ever going to get better? Like, are there ever going to be better days to come? And I think when you then, when you read the Bible and when you just simply pray, then you feel like God is listening to you. And don't ever lose that, like if, to the listeners, like if you're ever feeling abandoned or alone, then, go to open the Bible and just read his words, and you'll see that you're never actually alone. He's always with you. And I think that is just one of the most amazing things about your faith, that you can find hope through that encouragement of God being ever present, omnipresent,
Yeah. And, I feel from my experiences, I was not always in the faith. And what I realized for me was just kind of rationalizing it in the idea that everything changes, right, Grace? Everything. Relationship, people, things, places. But one thing encouraging me that kind of drew me to my faith today is God is constant. He doesn't change. And that in itself is comforting. It is comforting because there's a lot of things that we're just kind of wrestling in our minds. And, I do appreciate that we find what our why is. Why do we do? Why do we, like, it's not just, I want to be sober just to be sober or whatnot. But the whole thing about it is, when you define what your why is, I feel that it makes things a little bit more bearable, more solid, because you have a foundation of why you're doing what you're doing. And I think George Bernard Shaw kind of says it. This came to mind. It says 2 things define you: the patience when you have nothing and the attitude when you have everything. A lot of us forget when we look back in our lives and maybe we're doing much better, but we forget about how we were back then. So we might be hypercritical of someone struggling. I feel being able to wrap yourself around and being comforted through the uncertainty, and allow yourself time to say, today didn't went well, but what do I value? Do I value just having this title, having this, or do I value what's intrinsically valuable to me, which is, we talked about our faith and all that stuff. But I find that these conversations are important. It's very reflective, but it makes us kind of challenges ourselves to move forward in our recovery, in our healing. And like I always say, this has got to be a safe place. And I really appreciate you, Grace, coming on and sharing a bit. And the holidays is a wonderful time, and also it can be a sad time. Any final thoughts you'd like to share with those listening today? Anything that you personally want to share with anyone who's struggling during these December months when this comes out? So I'm curious.
Well, actually, a quote comes to mind. I mean, I don't think I can say it off by heart from the Bible, but it's like, don't say the good days were in the past, but rather focus on the present.
Yes.
And I think when you're in a situation of uncertainty and hard times, it's hard to kind of be present because you want the good times to be back again. But instead, notice that actually the good times are going to come back again. And it's good to reflect and to be happy about the experiences that you've had, but don't wish that you could live in the past. The only way that we can be certainly fulfilled is by living in the present moment. And I'd just like to mention in my book, Chill Out and Cheer Up, a 10-step guide, it's like, I focus on that a lot, that, focusing on the present moment brings you in this awareness that will allow you to feel more fulfilled and more at ease, I think, with yourself. Because we want to live in the future or we want to live in the past, then it stops us from really embracing each and every moment that we're with, we're with each other or you're with yourself. And if you're going through hard times, listeners, just know and just trust that the good times are going to be back again.
Yes.
Even though it won't feel like it at times,
Yeah. And I really, all those who are listening, all those the links to her book and everything else will be in the notes. I also want to share that being present is very important. I don't know from your experience, but from mine, we use this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method to ground us, the grounding method, to kind of, especially during panic attacks or something like that, 5 things that you see around you, 4 things you can touch, something like that. Because a lot of times we're so busy being busy. We're so urgently busy to go nowhere. And for me, if I'm feeling sad, I'll just give, this is my final thoughts too for those listening. If I'm feeling sad one day, address it. Ask yourself why. Don't let it just slide, because sometimes there's some self-discovery when it's not to obsess about it, but the whole journaling portion may be a coping skill. But don't allow your feelings are not good masters, but they're good indicators. Don't let those things slide of where you're going, because being angry is not a bad thing. It just means that something needs to change. It's an indication that something you don't like. And I feel a lot of times when we allow ourselves to breathe and say, okay, this is something that you need to address, you can actually learn a lot from it. And I feel when it comes to recovery, when we come, I love how you say present, being present. Accountability is not a bad word then. If it's a safe place, if it's truly a safe place, being accountable is a wonderful thing. And one old church lady, I near and dear to me, she said, Robert, people are either blessings or lessons. And that's life. That's how life is. There's events that are blessings you're happy about, but there's sometimes that things are just lessons. But 2020 hindsight. But like you said in the very beginning, the quote I think kind of encapsulates what we're talking about. It says, hope is being able to see that there is light despite all the darkness. When we're so close to the elephant, we can't see the elephant. We just see the portion that we see. So sometimes pausing, allowing ourselves to not be dictated by other people's urgency, can allow us that breathing room that can propagate some healing. Thank you again, Grace, for agreeing to be a guest with us today. I want to share with those who are listening to stay tuned to Revive Ministries and all the various platforms, Facebook, YouTube, all that stuff. But our website is the hub where you can find a lot of it. This is goodbye from Revive Ministries Podcast, leaving you with this last quote. It's from Nelson Mandela. I started this whole journey with this one quote. I kind of focused on it. Said, may our choices reflect our hopes, not our fears.